Tales from the Plague by Richard Corben and Dennis Cunningham, first published in Weirdom Illustrated number 13, April of 1969. Greetings, everyone. Today we're going to look at Richard Corben's and Dennis Cunningham's fantastic Tales from the Plague, first published in Weirdom Illustrated number 13 by Dennis Cunningham in April of 1969. There are 3 printings of Tales from the Plague. The first one, as I mentioned, Weirdom Illustrated number 13, had a print run of 1,000, and it is very, very rare. The second printing, which you see here on the left, was published in 1971 by Weirdom Publications. It has a 10,000 print run, so it's a bit more accessible. You can still find them on eBay, for example, and they typically run between $30 to $70, depending on condition. The third printing was published in 1986 by Eclipse Comics and Bill Leach, as you see pictured here. It features a great wraparound, which is really quite nice. Tales from the Plague revolves around the Black Death, or Bubonic Plague, and caused millions of deaths along with a whole buttload of hysteria that went along with it. There are a couple of differences with these 2 printings of Tales from the Plague. Let's take a look first at the 1971 printing by Weirdom. As we open it up, we see that there's a really cool old-style drawing showing Matthew Hopkins, the Witchfinder General, on top. You have apparent witches. My imps' names are Pyewacket, for example. And here we have the details. Tales from the Plague number 1, wondrously illustrated by Gore, aka Richard Corben, published by Weirdom Publications in San Jose, California. Copyright 1969 by your friendly publisher and editor, Dennis Cunningham. This inside cover is not in the 1986 reprint. So we start off with the full-page spread with the host, Lorelei. And she says, "This is your hostess in horror, Lorelei, bringing you an ungodly account from the pages of history. Our subject matter concerns the Bubonic Plague, better known as the Black Death, which, by the way, once completely enveloped Europe, bringing death to over 1/3 of the population. What you're about to read is not merely a legend or myth, but instead are actual passages taken from 2 17th century manuscripts. I found the first of these near the ruins of the old Chelmesford courthouse. The following is the text of that first manuscript." Interesting bit of info, which is in the reprint. And this is Cunningham talking about this. "This was Corben's first attempt at a comic book, although the art is far from comic. Corben was 28 years old at the time and still working at Calvin Productions when he began working on Tales from the Plague. Dennis Cunningham was the first person to use Corben's art in the comic book field. Back in the late 60s and early 70s, Cunningham published a series of underground comics called Weirdom Illustrated. It was here in number 13, the special Plague issue, that Corben's artwork first surfaced. It didn't take long before Corben was recognized as one of the top artists in the country. Tales from the Plague was originally printed by Cunningham on 2 separate occasions, first in April of 1969, falling under the title Weirdom Illustrated number 13, Special Plague Issue. This was a small edition, 5 1/4 inches by 8 1/4 inches, printed by Dennis himself. There were only 1,000 of these printed, and they are extremely rare. The cover of this first edition was printed in 2 colors, black line with a brown wash, on heavy cardstock. The second printing came 2 years later in November of 1971. This book had a new full-color cover, which consisted of panels taken from the story. It was printed larger than the first edition, 6 1/2 inches by 10 1/8 inches, on newsprint with a lighter weight cover stock. This print run numbered only 10,000, which makes it a hard to find item today. Okay, to go through this, we are going to use the 1986 edition I have because it's simply in much better shape than the other one. This was the cover of Weirdom number 13. Okay, it was the brown wash with the black ink as I was describing there. Tales from the Plague is very well written. Dennis Cunningham did a great job. It's basically in two parts. The first part deals with an account written by the Witchfinder General, James Hopkins. And the second part is from this diary that's found, the account of Anne Ashby, who was the accused witch in this story. Corben's pen and ink work, even at this early stage. He's 28. So we start off with the Witchfinder General James Hopkins, and he's recounting the story of the Bubonic Plague. And it's really quite interesting because, of course, he's recalling the decree, the Elizabethan Witchcraft Act of 1563. And here's the decree. For divination of treasure trove and procuring unlawful love, life imprisonment and forfeiture of property. For attempting to recover by magical aids lost and stolen property, and seeking to cause murder by witchcraft, imprisonment for life. For causing bodily image by witchcraft, death. For destroying of goods and livestock by witchcraft, death and forfeiture of property. Witchfinder Hopkins on the trail, and he's getting tipped off that this potential witch, Anne Ashby, is concocting various things in her house. Of course, so they plan to go to the house, and they do. And simply put, they raid the house, they beat the hell out of the woman, and drag her off to jail. And here is the notice for the citizenry. Attention citizens, by order of the Queen, the accused witch, Anne Ashby, shall stand trial for her crimes on August 23rd. In the year of our Lord 1664, I believe they meant to say 1564. Pretty sure. Witnesses and citizens of Chelmesford are requested to attend. Signed, James Hopkins. So, of course, here we have the courtroom scene with Anne Ashby sitting there. There's Hopkins. Your Honor, members of the court and citizens of Chelmesford, now that you have heard my testimony, I bring forth still further evidence to prove Anne Ashby to be a witch. He brings on all of these quote-unquote witnesses that describe various hideous things that they've seen revolving around this woman, Anne Ashby. And so, of course, she is convicted of witchcraft and burned at the stake. This image is just fantastic. And so at the end, of course, they go back, they destroy all the animals in Anne Ashby's house, they burn her house to the ground, and then a few weeks later, the first signs of the Black Death start appearing in town. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. And of course, people are starting to develop boils on their arms and lesions and so forth, and they just die after a few days. After a few horrible days of, suffering. And of course it starts getting worse. Animals are catching it as well. So it's everywhere. This guy, completely insane, walking around town, butt naked, but with boils and lesions all over his body. A woman tears her eyes out from the pain. And of course, as things get worse, people are going insane. They're still partying at bars, having orgies, and just spreading this disease. This is a classic drawing here. A woman dead and her baby still nursing. Great black and white imagery. So the second part, as Lorelei introduces here, is from the perspective and diary of Anne Ashby, the accused witch, who of course is eventually burned at the stake. So she talks about the plague and what it's doing to people, and how people are getting tortured. They're going insane. They're just resorting to cannibalism here. They're cooking this guy, becoming zombie-like in the streets. So Anne Ashby is trying to figure out what it is. As we see in the beginning, we see what in reality is her lab that they go in and they eventually destroy. According to her account, she's actually investigating the disease, right? She's got blood samples and so forth, and she's trying to find out what it is and how it's spreading to people before, of course, they, break into her house and haul her off to prison and then eventually burn her to death. So it becomes very interesting because, of course, they, at the end, as you recall, they raid her house again and destroy all the animals and burn the house. And then weeks later, of course, the contagion really hits in Chelmesford. But the fact that she has vials of the blood that apparently is infected blood with the plague in her house, once they go in, they raid the house and they kill all the animals. And some of the animals get free, obviously, but they burn the house down. That unleashes the plague. So it's one of those situations where she was truly trying to help, but she was carrying the plague all along in her house, and then these idiots unleashed it with their final act of stupidity. There is the full wraparound. This was also made available as a poster. So yeah, they're kind of rare, but you will see them occasionally on eBay or other outlets. I hope you enjoyed this look at Richard Corben and Dennis Cunningham's Tales from the Plague, and I will talk to you soon.